in here, boy? Looking for trouble? Hey there. Last time I did the 92 M3, and today I'm gonna be driving something a little bit different. And although that car and the one I'm gonna be driving today both fall into the same sports car category, and they do not share too many similarities. Well, they're both V8 rear-wheel drive, but the driving experience couldn't be much more different than it is. Of the R129, introduced in 1989, manufactured all the way through the 90s until 2001. It got a pretty lengthy 12-year lifespan. It's pretty lengthy by today's standards, because nowadays usually it takes about 7 years for a car to get replaced, but back in the 80s, in the 90s, a 12-year lifespan wasn't so long. I believe there's two reasons for that. First of all, back in the 80s, modular platforms weren't a thing, so you didn't get like one platform shared between 10 or so models like you do get nowadays. So designing and manufacturing process was way more expensive for the manufacturer. And second of all, the whole industry was not so hectic, because nowadays you get typically 7-year lifespan of a model. Mid-time around 3 years into, you get a facelift to refresh to make the car stay relevant. Back in the 80s, that wasn't the case. You see the Porsche 928, the Ferrari Testarossa, Lamborghini Diablo, they both all had very lengthy lifespans, way longer than this one. Of course, during such pretty lengthy lifespan, Mercedes did some changes to kind of refresh the styling of the car and make it look more relevant to the times, because you know, during the 90s, the styling trends in the industry were kind of changing, so there were a couple touches here and there in the styling of the R29. For example, this famous Mercedes grille, it got fewer bars with larger holes. You can stick your finger in this. The whole front fascia was redesigned with different fog lamps, and I believe for the model year 1997 the xenon headlights became optional. And during those numerous facelifts, because I believe there were like 3 of them, you get a couple little touches like those side vents. Earlier there were 3 of them. Later cars like this one get only 2. It's a matter of taste, whether you like it or not. It just looks different. The very last cars got different design of the side view mirrors, more alike to the R129, a little more curvy in shape, like less boxy. Personally, I believe those ones fitted better because they go with the overall shape of the car, which is kind of boxy. Of course, the German engineers also showed some love for the rear end. Those tail lamps got a different shape and color for the later models. One particular touch of freshness in the Benz world was reversing the naming pattern, because up until 1994 the engine designation was first, and later it was reversed. You know what? In the 1990s you didn't have to get ridiculous wheels to look big on a car. Nowadays on a car like this you get 20s, 21s. Those wheels are 18-inch and they look appropriately big on the car. And I often wonder myself why it's the case. Because it's something that your eye can see, but you can explain it. And it's started to wonder And the answer is very simple, because the newer cars have very bulky, busy design, and here we got this very flat horizontal hood line, and the distance from here to here is very narrow, and it makes the wheel look really massive. Oh. One of the things I really love about the R129 is how 1990s it looks. It almost looks like it's from a 16-bit video game, Outrun or Top Gear. The R129 had a pretty wide selection of engines, ranging from 2.8 inline 6 all the way to 7.3 V12. This particular car is a 5-liter V8 sitting right in the middle of the range, and I believe most enthusiasts, most Mercedes connoisseurs, like the Merc Maniac, the guy that is lending me this car, agree that the 500 is the sweet spot of the range, because the entry levels inline sixes, I believe they were a little bit underwhelming. They didn't live up to the prestige of the car. And the V12, okay, don't get me wrong, you can't go wrong with a V12. Their power delivery is on a completely different level. You got lots of low-end torque, a kind of effortless torque, and this sound is addictive. But it boils down to the question what you're going to use this car for. If you're a car collector, the car is going to sit in the garage, and you're counting for appreciation, that this price going to go up in value. A V12 might be for you, but if you're gonna daily drive it, if you want to get some of this 19s vibe on a daily basis, I think the 500 is the way to go, because it gives you 80% of the performance you would get from a V12, but the maintenance costs are like 50%, so I believe it's a win-win. Okay, it may not be the Royal V12, but this 5-liter V8 is good for 320 horsepower and 470 Newton meters of torque, and I think it's plenty enough for this car, especially when you consider that it was a 90s car, so 320 was plenty. I didn't think I was gonna test drive an SL with the roof up. As you can see, the whole procedure takes about 20 to 25 seconds, and you can hear there's a lot of stuff going on. But that's what Germans do. They like to complicate things, but in this case it was well worth it. One thing you immediately notice when driving this car is how lazy the throttle pedal is. When you step on it, the initial 1 centimeter into the throttle pedal, you do not get any kind of response. You have to really dig into it, like I said, 1 centimeter, maybe 2 centimeters in, that you get any kind of throttle response. To my knowledge, this is a conventional cable-driven throttle, so it's kind of design. At first, it feels a little bit awkward, because you would expect that you get that you step on the gas and get immediate response. It's not at all the case here. You have to really mash it to get throttle response, but after a while your mind recalibrates, kind of adjusts to it, and after a couple kilometers it starts feeling really natural. And I think I could tell why it's the case, why they did that. I think Mercedes were aiming, well, until very recently they would always do that. They would aim for a more relaxed, laid-back driving experience compared to, say, more their to their competition like BMW mostly. The steering rack is also on the lazy side. You do not get too much feedback from the steering. As you can see, the whole physically the steering wheel is really 90s like. It's very big, and in the center section, as you can see, I'm making slight adjustments, and the car doesn't respond. It makes hardly any movement. But I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because it goes really well with the throttle response. It's very consistent of Mercedes to do that, because after a while, after you've been driving some other car, maybe more spirited, more aggressive, after a while your mind readjusts and you're starting to really enjoy this pleasant, laid-back driving experience, because it's very consistent. It puts you in a very relaxed mood. The suspension is pretty soft. I mean, this particular car has got Eibach springs and Bilstein shock absorbers, but overall it doesn't detach from the stock SL as far as you would imagine, because I've driven a stock one. It's pretty much the same. This one is a little bit more planted, but nowhere near modern cars. It goes well with the rest of the drivetrain. It gives the subtle, floaty feel that you would expect, and I pretty much like it. Some SLs, R129s, particularly the V12 ones, were equipped with adaptive suspension. I believe it was called the ADS. It was a primitive form of adaptive suspension. It was a hydraulic system. I haven't driven a car fitted with this system. I believe it would give a bit more of this floaty Mercedes feeling that you would get from aromatic air suspension. This car doesn't have it, but you still get this on cloud comfortable feeling. Like I said before, this one is a 5-liter V8 SL500. Actually, at the very end of the production run, they switched over to single overhead camshaft M113 engine, which has a little bit more low-end grunt, being a single overhead camshaft engine. This one is a little bit more rev happy, so it kind of goes down to your personal preference, whether you like to rev it up or prefer more low-end torque. As you step on it and start to drive it a little bit more aggressively, you immediately notice one thing. This car feels best at about 80%. When you start to reach for the last 20% of its of the chassis capabilities, it starts to show its age, because one area when the cars have really progressed its structural rigidity, you can actually feel the front and rear of the car really flexing. I would say it's like they're not, the front and the rear axle are not playing for the same team. There's kind of miscommunication between front and the rear axle. So it's, for lazy Sunday driving, it's really great. You appreciate this relaxed, subtle, floaty feeling, but when you start to step on it, it starts to show its vintage. But it's not to say it doesn't give you pleasure, but you have to be aware that this is a 30-plus-year-old platform. You have to be very forgiving. But it's really cool. When it comes to the transmission, I really can't complain about it, because the earlier car, the early V8 SLs, had a 4-speed hydraulically controlled unit. Then for a brief period they moved over to a 5-speed hydraulically controlled units. They both share quite bad reputation, and this is a electronic controlled 5-speed unit, and it's basically the same transmission you can get on a 996 turbo or 997 turbo before Porsche switched over to the PDK, and it's a very good transmission. Trust me on this. Of course, if you expect the kind of response you would get from a Mercedes 7 G-Tronic, you're not gonna get this. But let's get it real. It's a 30-plus-year-old transmission, and it's really great for what it is. Okay, we're cruising at about 1200 RPM. I step on it, I get immediate response. Let's kick over. As a bonus, when you step on it, you get this thump. Those long, winding roads, it's where this car is at. Get into this kind of scenario, it starts to show its age, because the nose wants to dive outside. You get some substantial amount of understeer. It can't be adjusted by disabling the stability control and giving it more throttle, but I'm not gonna do it because the driver of this car would not approve, I suppose. But trust me, it can be the initial understeer that you get from this heavy nose can be compensated for by the throttle input. Okay, let's try that again. Oh yeah! Torque just kicked in, yo! This exclamation mark means that guys at Stuttgart do not approve of my childish behavior. Obviously, like I said before, you do sacrifice some of this structural rigidity because it's a 90s car, it's an open top, but frankly, I'm not missing it at all. Nur fliegen ist schöner. On the inside, it's pretty much everything you would expect from a Mercedes-Benz at this vintage. They weren't trying to reinvent the wheel here, so you get this white and orange instrument cluster you would find to pretty much any Mercedes from that era. Get all the necessary gauges. What's interesting, on the earlier models, this odometer used to be was analog. On this one, it's digital. Second change, earlier on I mentioned Mercedes switching over from a 4-speed to a 5-speed transmission. The earlier ones didn't have number 4 here on the gate. Here it goes all the way up to the number 4. The rest, one thing I find particularly appealing about this interior, and it doesn't apply only to this car, to other premium cars of this vintage also, this plastic on the dashboard has got some tenderness to it. When you touch it, you feel it almost like it was wrapped in leather. I don't know how to describe it, but when you have an opportunity, try it on yourself, on your own. It really is nice to touch. The design is as simple as possible. I can imagine that the design team had like two tools, pencil and the ruler, and they made a really good use of it. But it's kind of it served its purpose really perfectly. One interesting thing, in the Jim Carrey movie Liar Liar, he drives an SL 500, I believe, or 600. Cameraman.
500.
500, okay. And there's a scene he gets pulled over by a police officer and he opens a glove compartment. Trivia, there's no glove compartment on this car. This footage, I believe, was taken from a W140 S-Class. What can I say about this center console? This wooden trim, not a huge fan. It looks like an 80s like an 80s closet. I don't know how to compare it, but it doesn't look appealing. First of all, it doesn't look wood-ish enough to me. It just looks very artificial. It doesn't go well with the overall presence of the car, but that's a minor complaint. The rest is the quality of the rest is really top-notch. Seats, I really do love seats of this car, and one highlight of the seats is the anchor point of the seat belt is here on the seat. You don't have any kind of contraption to hand the seat belt to you. It's fixed in here. I believe that it goes all the way to the floor, but it's anchored here. It's really convenient. You don't have to swing around. You don't have to reach very far to the back. The seat belt is always here, and it looks really cool. It gives the seat this kind of Darth Vader shape. It's really great. When it comes to the shape of the seat itself, the base, the bottom part is really wide. You get plenty of space, not so much support from these bolsters, but as you move up, those bolsters get really bulky, so it's kind of, you get way more space here than here. Warning, when you're doing your lats and you get really developed back with wide lats, you can find it really hard fitting in here, but seriously, the seats are really comfortable. I've done, I could say, hundreds of kilometers in this car. It's one of the most comfortable seats I've ever sat in. I would put them on par with the comfort seats on modern BMWs, and that's saying a lot. They're really great. What else? We got this glove compartment, or whatever, cocaine compartment, whatever you want to call it, you name it. I think Nick Murray made a joke about 1980s executives, business executives, snorting cocaine in their and 928s. I think in the 90s lots of business executives did drugs in those cars, so this came pretty handy.